Hello, everyone. I am here in Washington, D.C. I'm going to wait a minute, let a few folks, I hope, come to join me here in this space as we gather on this Wednesday for Ponderings from the Purple Parlor, which is where I am at this point. And I'm welcoming folks to join me for a few minutes. I did a little remote sharing last week as I was on retreat. I appreciate many of you tuning into that, even in my absence. It was good to know that you were praying with me, along with me, as I was out in Pennsylvania doing my annual 8-day silent retreat. It's good to be home. And before I share any more, I see some folks coming to join me. Do let us know, let me know where you're joining from today. It's always a delight. It's fun to see where folks are and check in, let us know you've been here with us. Welcome. Good to see some of the folks who have been creating this community together over many, many weeks and months. Welcome, everyone. Again, my name is Ginger Gaines Sorelli. I'm the senior pastor here in Washington, D.C. at Foundry United Methodist Church. And every Wednesday we have a few unscripted ponderings from here in the Purple Parlor of my home. So glad to be able to be with you and to share a little bit with you. Last week I was on retreat, and I shared in my reflection last week that these annual retreats are always a blessing or a gift, and they're always a little bit of a surprise. I might have some inkling of where energy in me might be as I enter into the retreat, but I never know where it is that God will want to lead me, and that's always now for many years been my goal, that I would allow Spirit to simply move as she will and to be present with Jesus, honestly, for those days that I'm there. Silence can, in fact, be very, very loud. I shared last week that these annual retreats are either what I've come to call resting retreats, which are lovely, or wrestling retreats, when I am given spiritual work to do that is difficult and that I might not necessarily have chosen to do on my own. I will share with you that this year was, in fact, I think more than it was mostly a wrestling retreat. It was mostly a wrestling retreat. I had some beautiful, beautiful moments. I felt very close to God, and that was a great gift. Some beautiful moments. But there was a lot of deep work that Spirit was drawing me into and asking me to address. So I come back full and with a lot to ponder and to continue to consider. I'm grateful for that, for all of it. I'm a little tired. After my 8 days away in this beautiful, serene, idyllic setting. One of the things that was coming up a lot was fear. I don't tend to be somebody who feels consciously afraid that often. Even sometimes probably when I should feel afraid, I don't feel afraid. And what I discovered was that I was having a lot of this sort of unnecessary fear that was coming up, and I just figured there was some reason for it. One of the messages that I received in my prayer was this. I wrote it down because I wanted to share it with you. One morning, I think I was saying, please, can I just get some relief from this? Because I'd like to have just a nice, pleasant, peaceful day. And part of the message that I received was be free, be joyful, be in this moment. Don't take the time and place for granted. receive the gifts of this day. And then this. Don't sacrifice any of it at the altar of fear. Don't sacrifice any of it at the altar of fear. And that last line took my breath away. I thought, because one of the things that I was being asked to do was to surrender things that might have begun to be for me temptations to idolatry, and sort of surrendering and releasing and letting go. And it was just a lot of stuff. But this idea of the altar of fear, I mean, what a phrase. We worship at the altar of fear. What do we sacrifice at the altar of fear? Whew. And I began to wonder how much of my life, how many moments, how many minutes, how many opportunities to experience something beautiful or a gift that I have sacrificed at the altar of fear because my brain was like focused on something, obsessing about something that was unnecessary, that was, the kind of fear that I'm thinking about and that was coming up was the kind of fear that you're like imagining some terrible thing happening that hasn't happened. It's not like it's there. It's just like, oh my gosh, what if this and what if that? And what is that? I am, in thinking about all of this, I mean, do you all, just hitting a chord with anybody ever have moments where you realize that you've like sat and stewed about something that actually hadn't happened, that you were really like all worked up in fear over? It was just an imagining. It was like you were just thinking, well, this could happen, and what if that happened? But it hasn't happened. I mean, terrible things could happen all the time, but it's this invitation to sort of be in the moment. We don't need to lean into it. It's like Jesus reminding us, like there's, don't worry about all those things that you need. You're going to get what you need. Tomorrow will be tomorrow. Be now. Be right in this moment. So anyway, one of the things I was thinking about as I was trying to process this energy that was coming up on my retreat, I remembered one of my favorite episodes of one of my favorite shows, and haters gonna hate, so do what you need to do. But let me just tell you that I am, without apology, a Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan. So, one of my favorite Buffy episodes was one of the classic Halloween episodes when Buffy had gone to college and they went to a party at a frat house. And it was, they had the whole sort of haunted house thing, and the thing that was going on was that you go into the house and there was energy that had been conjured on accident that would make whatever your fear was, whatever your sort of deep fear was, it would come to life. It would become a corporeal thing. And people were really getting hurt by this because, our worst fears are really icky and dangerous and painful. So they were like running through the house being attacked by the things they were most afraid of. And of course it was both funny and and scary. But what ended up happening is that they found the book, they got the book and they were looking up who this demon was that was like stirring up all this stuff, the fear demon. And they saw the picture and it was this awful, terrible thing. And of course they were racing to try to stop it, and Buffy had done everything she could, but they had failed. And so all of a sudden the floor opens up and the demon's going to come out, and they just figure they're done. Well, guess what? The demon comes up out of the floor and it is like this big. And they just sort of squish it. And they look at the book and they're like, oh, we didn't read the fine print. This big, terrible, horrible creature, it says actual size. I love this. This is like an amazing parable metaphor for fear. It's like this tiny little thing that becomes this huge thing, which we then allow to manifest in our lives and just steal whole chunks of our life. It may sound ridiculous, but for me, it's helpful to find some way to laugh in the midst of what can be petrifying, terrifying, and paralyzing fear. So yeah, fear. What do we sacrifice at the altar of fear? I found some verses from the Psalms again that speak to this. Psalm 34, the first 8 verses. So I was reflecting on some of these things. This is the way it begins. I will bless the Lord at all times. God's praise shall continually be in my mouth. My soul makes its boast in the Lord. Let the humble hear and be glad. Oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt God's name together. I sought the Lord, and God answered me and delivered me from all my fears. Look to God and be radiant, so your faces shall never be ashamed. This poor soul cried and was heard by the Lord and was saved from every trouble. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear God and delivers them. O taste and see that the Lord is good. Happy are those who take refuge in God. In that psalm, just those verses, we hear the word fear used in 2 different ways. And what I was interested by that. And so I went and I looked up and realized that, not unusually, there are many, many, many Hebrew words that are translated into English as fear. And at least 2 of them I discovered are really, really interesting. One in the biblical Hebrew is pachad, which is kind of has the meaning of that fear I was talking about a minute ago, that projected, that imagined fear. Fear of some object or some outcome that you are really just imagining. You're making it up. And aren't we good at that? I don't know about y'all, but I can come up with some awful scenarios. I mean, I go from 0 to 60 in 5 seconds. No, a second. It doesn't take me any time at all. Anyway, so that's this sort of pachad fear. You're imagining the worst. And then there's another word for fear, Yura. And this is interesting. This is a fear that one rabbi, anyway, describes as overcoming us, this fear that overcomes us when we suddenly find ourselves in possession of considerably more energy than we're used to. We're inhabiting a larger space than we're used to inhabiting. It's like we're being invited into to sort of take up more space. We're being invited or called to do more, to be more, to become more of ourselves. And sort of sense of awe, of both being humbled by this invitation into a larger space, but also being like, oh my gosh, I'm being asked to be in this larger space. Oh my gosh, there's more of me to become, and that means change, and that can feel a little bit frightening, but it's also awesome. And this sense that God is with you in it, and that it's God's voice that's calling you in it. This is the kind of awe and fear that we might associate with Moses encountering God in the bush, what we call the burning bush. That voice that was speaking to Moses out of the fire, calling him to go and to be a liberator for those who were enslaved, his people who were enslaved. Moses didn't feel ready, and Moses was like, I'm out here herding the sheep. And, oh, by the way, I did some stuff in Egypt that I might not want to have to confront if I go back there. And God was like, oh, you're the one. Oh, but I'm stutter. Nope, but you're the one. This sense of being drawn into a bigger space. There's more of you, and I need you to step into that larger space, to let yourself, the more of you, fill that space. It's a fearful, awesome thing. That's Yura. I've heard it said that in this moment of COVID-19, with everything being changed, all of this shifting and having to adapt and pivot and all of that, we know it's been difficult and challenging, but there's also a sense in which we are being given this invitation to think in new ways and to recalibrate kind of where our energies are and how we're focusing and what the gifts we have that we can bring to bear, or to, as I've said before, what are we learning about ourselves? Who are we meeting in these days? There's a lot we might fear. We fear the illness, we fear loss, we fear change, but what if we began to also think about leaning into this space and trying to listen for that voice, perhaps a still small voice of spirit, of God, of our own deeper wisdom that knows that we might be invited in this time to think in a new way, to discover something, to offer something, to be part of something new and creative. I guess one of the other things that I was really mindful of in this past week was so much of all of this. I mean, the experience that I had, this sort of being bombarded, which again does not happen to me often. So I always think, well, if it's happening, there must be some reason that God is wanting to do something. And so I recognized that part of what that was for me, that sort of being bombarded by these, what I call the devilish voices, tempting me to fear. It was like reminding me of the things that I'm afraid of losing. And part of the invitation was to say, well, yeah, okay, I lose those things. All I need is God's love and presence with me, and God will guide me through. Because who I am, is who I am. It's not dependent on these other things that I might need to release or let go. The fear was itself an angel, if you will, part of the message, perhaps. So, I'll also share this with you. It might be useful to you, maybe not. It has been useful to me for many years. I think it was about 8 years ago, 8 or 9, something like that, that my retreat director, I was dealing with some, I don't remember why, but I was dealing with some fear. So I'm human. Deeply, terribly human. And she said, any of those, they call them in the Jesuit tradition, the Ignatian exercises, desolating voices, desolating energies. So when those voices begin to come up, and she was this funny little woman who you wouldn't think, you would look at her and be like, but there was so much there. Anyway, she would say to me, she said, when those voices come up, tell them to go back to hell where they belong. Such good advice. Anyway, so here's some thoughts. This is what's been on my mind. I've been thinking about fear. And maybe there's a way that we can try to transform our fear, to release the fear that we need to send back to hell. Tell those voices that are just trying to knock you off course, just tell them to go back to hell where they belong. Pay attention if there's something trying to get through that you feel might be a gift from God, a message, something to pay attention to. Invite God into that with you. And also maybe lean into that sense, that other sense of fear, that awe, that invitation to step into something maybe new, bigger, more, which can feel fearful, but God's always wanting to help you do more of you. So that's what I got today. It's great to be with you. I'm going to continue pondering all this stuff. You're probably going to be getting retreat reflections for a while, so thank you so much for being here with me, my friends. It's great to see all of you. If I should say this, if this time in any way is helpful or useful to you, I hope you'll share it with other people. I never quite know. I always have a direction. I never know quite what's going to come out. Sometimes it's probably more helpful than others. But I'm grateful. I'm grateful to be able to be with you all each week. Will you pray with me? Loving God, for the blessing of this day, for the gift of everything, even the moments when we realize that we are being bombarded with fear. We thank you that you are with us to help give us wisdom and guidance, to guard us from that which would seek to do us harm, to give us courage and strength, and the ability to grow. Help us to trust you more all the time. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks again so much for being here. I hope that you will continue to stay connected in these ways and in other ways that Foundry is offering. If you are part of, anybody, we got family camp coming up, and it is sounding amazing. So I hope this is a way to connect with other people. It's intergenerational. This is not just for parents and kids. This is for anybody who would like to just connect in a sense of community over a few days of the weekend. And I hope you'll look it up and see what Pastor Casey has in store, because it really does look like it'll be a special experience. So check that out on our website, and do join us for worship and other things that we got going on. We've got some really neat things happening. May the peace of God dwell richly, richly within you, and may you know the transforming and liberating power of God's love for you. I'll see you next time, everyone.